one of the big areas in terms of the IAM could be moving and trending is just the concept of passwordless authentication. So talk a little bit about where things are trending there.
Yeah, absolutely. So one of the key things that organizations are very sensitive to is both employee and customer experience, right? And even though there's web single sign-on and sophisticated authentication tools, there's still a number of identities that you have to keep track of, and traditional two-factor authentication or multi-factor authentication tools, relatively speaking, are clunky. So one of the things, and not only are they clunky, but you could do man-in-the-middle attacks on multi-factor authentication, right? If you're sending, a multi-digit code, or you're sending a text message to validate that you are who you say you are. It's really difficult to copy biometrics, right? My facial geometry or my voice. There's a number of ways that you can use biometrics to not just facilitate authentication, enhanced authentication, but just make it a better user experience. And so we're right at the point where the ability to integrate authentication, biometric authentication, is much easier. The other thing is that you need to address not just the front end of authentication, but make sure that you remove IDs and passwords and other authentication throughout the infrastructure. So for example, when I'm using my smartphone, for example, and it's looking at my facial characteristics, or it's looking at my thumbprint, it's making a simpler user experience, but you're not addressing the back end applications and infrastructure. So you could still have IDs and passwords plugged into a back end in a database or in a number of other places. And if that remains there, then there's still some leverage points that an attacker can take advantage of. So part of going to the next generation of authentication, and particularly biometrics, is looking at all the authentication supply chain and making sure that you're addressing all of that infrastructure. Hopefully that answers your question.
It does. It does. Certainly, biometrics is one of the key areas related to passwordless that organizations may look toward. It's not the only one, obviously. There are other concepts behind passwordless as well. Do you have any particular recommendations regarding things like magic links or one-time passwords, codes, push notifications? What are pros and cons of some of these other alternative forms of passwordless as well?
Yeah, so one of the advantages of things like magic links and one-time passwords is that you're using one more step to make sure that the person is who they claim they are. But again, you still have IDs and passwords that are sitting outside of the infrastructure. I would also say that when you look at technology infrastructure that exists right now, most people don't like change. So moving from one-time passwords and magic links to biometrics is something that fundamentally changes the infrastructure and how it's managed, and user experience. I've worked in my banking days, when I worked with consumer identity solutions. The marketing people in general were really resistant to change, right? They really don't like any change to user experience. So part of getting there is telling a really good story to the business stakeholders that part of this identity journey is not only making a user experience simpler, but you're also protecting their identities at a higher level. And that also just plays into, identity is a big ticket item in general. And so when you're embarking on a project, you really have to look at all the stakeholders within an enterprise, tell a good story, tell them the benefits, what's in it for them, what's going to be the financial impact, regulatory impact. There's a number of things that you have to communicate why you're doing what you're doing, as opposed to giving a mandate and saying, we're moving to biometric authentication and you'll like it. That addresses a number of collaboration and cultural issues. When people feel like they're part of the solution, they will much more willingly go along for the ride as opposed to going kicking and screaming. I always say that, technology is easy, but politics and money get in the way. And part of getting past the politics and money issue is telling a good story.